Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a medical doctor with very, very many interests in the well-being space from Toronto, Canada, Dr. Sabina Nagpal. Sabina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sabina is a medical doctor and she's the founder of Radiate Mind. She's a fulfillment facilitator and she's a Canadian trained psychiatrist and an assistant professor at McMaster University with a fellowship in psychotherapy. So, Sabina, let me start by asking you, tell me a little bit about your own journey and what was the inspiration behind starting Radiate Mind?
Thank you. Yes, I love to sort of get into this part of my story. So as you mentioned, I'm a psychiatrist, Canadian trained psychiatrist with a very special interest in psychotherapy. And in that work, I've worked with people for, quite extensive periods of time, sometimes a
Mhm.
year, sometimes longer, doing very deep psychotherapy work. And what I noticed over time is that while that does help people to kind of get rid of some of their symptoms or improve pathology,
Mm.
it missed something in terms of getting people from kind of good to great, if you will, or to kind of what I sometimes use the analogy is it's about excavating what's kind of holding us back, but it doesn't fill those gaps. And
Mm.
so what I realized is that there's more needed, that what we need is an integration of this kind of evidence-based mental health and what I call spirit-nourishing practices to help people to lead better and have the greatest impact that they can. And that's what I really want to do is I sort of saw this gap and
Mm.
wanted to fill
Mm.
it.
Fascinating. And can you explain the overdrive epidemic you often speak about and how it particularly affects women?
Yes, sure. So in my work with like literally thousands of women, what I see is that there's a pattern. There's a pattern that I think what I call now the overdrive epidemic, which is that we all many high performing people work in this way where we feel like we need to be always doing more,
Mhm.
achieving more, getting more, driving faster. And that pressure from the external world, which has been internalized, is
Mhm.
what keeps us in this overdrive state. So
Mhm.
people that sort of help people that have trouble identifying with it, usually the cue I say is if you feel like you achieve something, you don't even have a minute to
Mhm.
celebrate your win because you're too busy either moving on to the next or looking back at how you could have done it more efficiently,
Mhm.
then you're in this and this kind of go, go, go piece
Mhm.
that we're all in. And so that has impacts. And what I've noticed is that many people
Mhm.
achieve success, right? So they tick the boxes, but they never find fulfillment.
Right.
And on the journey to get there, they lose the capacity to ever find fulfillment. And I see that as a impact both on health and well-being, but also on performance. That we
Mhm.
actually don't reach our highest capacities if we stay in this epidemic
Fascinating. And for my viewers and listeners, can you give me an example or a story of someone? I mean, I don't want any names, of course.
of people of someone being in the
Someone,
overdrive
someone
epidemic.
who you've helped
Yeah,
handle the overdrive
yeah.
epidemic.
So I had a session yesterday with a gentleman who oversees a large psychotherapy practice, actually.
Mhm.
And when he started with me, he was doing really well. Young guy, really high achiever,
Mhm.
for all extensive purposes, very successful and
Mhm.
and nothing wrong with continuing in that way. But he came because he realized that this kind of drive to keep going and going and going was not allowing him to maybe meet his highest purpose, right? To kind of, he knew that there was an untapped potential, an untapped capacity. And
Mhm.
so through our work together, understanding what are the sort of psychological pitfalls of that, and
Mhm.
how can we integrate better practices to kind of slow down the mind and understand when we are in our more valued state.
Mhm.
We spoke yesterday, and he was telling me he's doing a lot better in that he realizes that it's okay to have what I call an off season. It's okay to have time to recover because in that time is when we actually uncover our best selves, when we can
Mhm.
actually utilize the best parts of our brain. And
Mhm.
so, in that, he's sort of finding ways of leading and problem solving in his business far different than he used to, and also feeling more kind of joy, clarity, ease, and all these
Mhm.
other pieces. So,
What a
it's
great
success
response.
and fulfillment.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing this particular story. Sabina, my next question is that you are a psychiatrist, you're a performance coach, you're a mother of three. How does all these diverse roles influence your approach to work?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's sort of, I can't just talk about this performance piece. I have to live it
Yeah.
because I wear a few hats. So I mean, from a psychiatry perspective, what I believe is that the symptoms that one experiences in our minds, in our bodies, et cetera, from
Mm.
our psychological needs are information that we
Mhm.
can use and we can listen to it in order to heal, get
Mhm.
to wellness, and then get to our best,
Yeah.
to perform our best. And so, my experience in working in psychiatry has guided me to understand what these signals are from our body, and then I use that in my coaching where I help people to understand themselves, their mind, their body, their spirit, and the information they can get from it. It
Mm.
also helps me to teach people what I teach patients is sort of how to have more empathy, how to
Mm.
understand group dynamics, how to understand how relationships with ourselves and others impact the way we perform. So that's kind of what I do on a coaching perspective. And then as a mother, I have to test it all. Because
Mm.
as a
Right.
mother, there's no such thing as being perfect. There's no such thing, there's humility every day. And you see as a mother, I'm a leader as well. I'm the leader of my family.
Mm.
And I have to and it humbles me to see when I'm not at my best, when I'm in overdrive, when I'm not able to tap into my highest capacities, be connected to myself. I
Mm.
don't lead as well. And I can see the results of that in
Mm.
my family all the time.
Fascinating. Let's now talk about Radiate Mind. Tell me a little bit more about Radiate Mind and what are some of the common mental health challenges women face during reproductive transitions, such as pregnancy, postpartum, and menopause, as well as outside of these transitions?
Yeah, so I mean, I see transitions both as coming from biological reasons. So that's what you mentioned, these kind of hormonal changes that happen in pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, and aging in general. But they also can come from psychological transitions. So that can be a recent move, a change in marital status. It can be scaling your business. You've just got all the investment that you just got all the investment you were working towards, you fundraised appropriately, and now you have to actually act, you have to actually execute. So that
Mm.
can be a transition, right? So many transitions in general, loss, grief, they bring out our blind spots, our psychological blind spots.
Mhm.
And so even when we're doing well, when we've had resilience, when we're taking the right actions to take care of our mind, our body, our kind of our best spirit, in the context of a transition, we might be pulled back. That's what I see is very common. So in my model, where we have these various mind states, overdrive being one of them that I talked about, um, what I see is that transitions can bring us back to overdrive or into burnout, even when we know we should be doing other things,
Mm.
or even when we've kind of bounced back from adversity in the past. In the
Mm.
context of transition, it's good to be ready for some of those challenges to come back, and
Mm.
then we want to take action both from a kind of biological perspective, but also psychological and spiritual
Mm.
perspective to kind
Mm.
of calm our nervous system, stop operating in overdrive, and then get back to our best performance.
Mm. You also mentioned, spiritual. How does that work? I mean, is that a part of the whole overall process to be able to settle someone down or help through the transition?
Yeah, so what I'd say is that in the context of the modern world, many of us operate on in this from what I call anxious energy. So we
Correct.
don't have anxiety disorders, but we have anxious energy. We run on this overdrive.
Mm.
In that context, as you and many of your listeners probably know, there's this difficulty of being on cortisol. Cortisol drives us,
Yeah.
right? So we go, we go, we go. It's very energizing. And it works because it helps us tick boxes.
Mm.
But if we do that all the time as our resting state,
Mm.
if that's where we stay, then we're at risk of burnout, we're at risk of mental ill health, and we don't
Mm.
perform at our best.
Mm.
the benefit of bringing in the spirit, and this doesn't have to be God, this doesn't even
Mm,
have to be
mm,
yoga meditation, although it can be.
yeah.
Anything that slows us down, brings us into the present moment, it recruits our parasympathetic nervous
Mm,
system. So the opposite of what cortisol kind of what sort of drives cortisol. And
mm,
when we invite, what I say, when we invite the parasympathetic nervous system to the party, then we have the capacity to slow down and we use the best of our bodies and the best of our brains. We have
mm,
capacities in our brains to perform at our best that we don't have when we operate under cortisol. And
mm.
so that's why I bring in this spiritual aspect. For some people, that's as simple as getting into nature more often.
Yeah.
For some people, that's breath work. For some people, that's the arts, right? So any, whether that's dance or singing or painting, what have you, I help people explore what can kind
Mm.
of nourish their spirit. For some people, that can be meditation, yoga, and for some people, it's reconnecting with whatever spiritual roots they were brought up with. But I do believe that the integration of the two in
Yeah.
some format is the answer.
Great response. Thank you. And what does resilience look like during major life transitions, such as motherhood, career shifts, or just loss?
So, I mean, everyone has a different definition of resilience. So
Yeah.
I'll give you mine because I think that's important.
Mm,
Resilience to me is the capacity not just to bounce back from adversity, but to
mm,
bounce back stronger,
mm.
right? So you're actually better from having gone through the challenge.
Yeah.
And so what that looks like, as I kind of mentioned earlier in our chat, is that it's when we're able to recruit the best of our
Mhm,
biology, right? So that's exercise, sleep, diet, or for people that have mental ill health, it could include medication.
mhm,
Um, so that's our biology and our psychology. So we understand these aspects of ourselves that keep dragging, that pull us back, that
mm,
drag us down.
mm,
Understanding these, what I call psychological blind spots. And there's patterns for high performing people. Usually the blind spots are kind of, within a few categories that I help people understand very
mm,
quickly for
mm,
themselves. And once you understand those for yourselves, you're now stronger having gone through the adversity than you were before you started. And
mm,
then when the next one comes, you
mm.
can see it faster and bounce back faster.
Very interesting. And how does one find greater resilience when one is faced with these kind of challenges?
How does one find greater resilience? I mean, all of us have resilience in
Mhm.
us. That's something that's inherent in us, right?
Yeah.
No one is born without any resilience.
Mm,
The more adversity we've had and the more support we've had to get through adversity, ideally in our early years, the
mm,
higher capacity we have for future adversity. So finding resilience to me is it's a long game. It's understanding for ourselves and having a resting state that where we're practicing things that keep us strong, right?
mhm,
So,
mhm,
as I said, this kind of taking care of our bodies, taking care of our minds, taking care
mm.
of our spirits at the best of, when there is no adversity,
Yeah.
so that in the context of adversity, we can find our way and bounce back stronger. If we haven't done that, and that happens to people, the kind of chief factor for resilience for those that kind of want the shortcut, in my
Mhm,
experience, is support. So
mm,
it's finding the people that can support you, knowing how to access those supports. And a lot of the work I do is helping people to understand their patterns of relationships that stop them from using their supports.
mm.
But I'd say if you wanted one answer for how one can find resilience, support is one of our
Right.
chief factors for finding resilience.
Well said. And one of the things I've seen, and I guess it's there in every generation, that every generation wants to have it all. And my question to you is, how do you help high achieving women, or for that matter, men, or anyone who's a high achiever? How do you help them to handle the pressure to have it all while maintaining mental health?
Yeah, it's a good question. My thesis is that you can have success and fulfillment.
Right.
That both are possible. In fact, if you take the effort to find your way towards fulfillment, your success will grow.
Correct.
But it's about that faith in in moving out of this overdrive epidemic into what I call the fulfillment movement, that you
Mm.
can have both.
Right. Let's now talk a little bit about the same support, but from the corporate perspective. How can leaders design policies that support women, especially during pivotal life stages like parental leave or menopause?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of work around, there's a lot more work, at least in North America, around menopause and sort of how this can come into organizations, but
Yeah.
we're in early days. I'd say one of the things that I think is really lacking that I see in the work that I do is while there is more effort towards mental health in organizations,
Mm.
and sort of more effort towards, you know, trying to increase awareness, what's really still lacking is the feeling that if one were to be vulnerable and bring forward some of their challenges, that they won't be penalized. That's still a real problem in organizations. And
Right.
so I would say that policies that somehow reward people
Mm.
for authenticity and for bringing leaders that bring forward some of their challenges,
Mm.
uh, if we could have policies that reward that, that would change things.
Mm.
Because what we know is that leaders that can be vulnerable and authentic breed psychological safety. That's
Mm.
the reality. And people will perform better when they feel psychologically safe.
Mm.
So, as a policy, I think that opportunities to reward leaders that take that risk towards vulnerability and lead with authenticity would really move the needle.
Mm. Amazing. Sabina, a few minutes back, we were talking about spirituality and how you help use spirituality to support. I wanted to go a little more deep into that and say that what role does spiritual or spirit nourishing practices play in enhancing women's well being?
I mean, I think it enhances everyone's well-being, but for women specifically, what I like to do is I like to think about what do women have had some disadvantage, let's make keep it simple, in the workplace. um,
Okay.
and so and so what I like to do is teach women how they can use these practices in order to enhance their capacity in their performance. And
Mm.
what we know is that these practices, they can be our competitive advantage for women. So we can learn to when we start utilizing our parasympathetic nervous system, we have the capacity to integrate regions of our brain more effectively. For instance, the right brain and the left brain are better integrated when we recruit our parasympathetic nervous system into our life, into our body,
Mm.
when it's firing more. And
Mm.
when we can integrate right brain and left brain, we have the capacity for more creative problem solving. When we can integrate our cortical, our kind of more executive function brain, sequencing, planning, et cetera, with our emotional brain, we can lead more effectively. We can empathize better. We can find solutions that work for a group. We
Mhm.
can understand what one's kind of how to support people better. We can inspire people. So we have these capacities. If we utilize these spirit nourishing practices, we can integrate the regions of our brain in order to perform better. The other
Mm.
thing that's really interesting for women that I like to talk about is our capacity to tap into oxytocin is can be a competitive advantage as well. Again, by recruiting our parasympathetic nervous system,
Mm.
when we use oxytocin in the context of stress, what we naturally do is we recruit what we call tend and befriend. We bring people along in our creative problem solving solutions when we use oxytocin. The antithesis to that is when we only fire on cortisol, this kind of steroid that keeps us going. What we're more likely to do in the context of stress, if we use cortisol, is we're lone wolves. We kind of choose what we want to do and move forward. Women that can learn how to utilize these strengths and these opportunities can recruit oxytocin more easily and then therefore lead more effectively. So what I say is that for women specifically, utilizing some of these strategies can be a competitive advantage in the workplace.
Amazing. Let's talk about coaching. You are a coach. So my question is, how do you blend psychotherapy with performance coaching?
Good question. So what I do is I do a comprehensive assessment because I'm a physician and I have so much experience in psychology. I help, if I'm working with an individual, I
Mm.
help people to understand what are their blind spots. And for most high performers, their blind spots, their psychological blind spots are fall into three different categories. One is unhelpful beliefs.
Mhm.
The second is repeating patterns of relationships. So we all have characteristic ways that we relate to people under stress. understanding those for ourselves and how they impact our leadership capacity can be
Mhm.
exceptionally powerful. Because
Mm.
if we can alter them, we lead better. The third one is emotional avoidance. So I help people to understand their psychology and their
Mm.
psychological blind spots, and
Mm.
then I integrate that with evidence-based coaching practices. So
Mm.
things that help us go from good to great. And when we do them together, what we find is that we don't only get the benefit that you would get from psychotherapy, which is uncovering things, we're filling them with how we can be better. And
Mm.
on the other side, if we know what we should be doing, but somehow we can't get ourselves to do it regularly, or we're doing well and then something comes at us and we fall, understanding our psychology helps us to bounce back and do the practices that many coaches use more
Mm.
effectively. So it's the combination of the two. And then the last piece is basically everything I do is based in neuroscience. And
Mm.
because that's where my background comes in.
Yeah.
So I take the best of neuroscience from both and
Mm.
combine them for the programs that I offer, both to
Okay.
individuals and organizations.
Fascinating. I have time for two more questions for you. How can technology and digital platforms be used effectively to support mental health?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I have to admit my bias. I think technology is dangerous for our brains, I think, in
Mhm.
general. And I have a lot of grave concerns about the impact in general on the development of our brains, especially for children.
Mhm.
That said, there are advantages to
Mm.
technology that we must harness if we're going to deal
Yeah,
with the negative consequences.
correct.
I think the biggest ones that I notice are one, that we can spread the message more easily, right? You and I would have a lot of difficulty having this conversation
Correct.
if not for technology. I wouldn't have the access to the wide audience that you have
Mm.
without technology. So
Mm.
that's wonderful. The other piece is, as I talked about, the other piece that I talked about was support, right? And so technology can be a vehicle to
Mm.
utilize support. It might not replace in-person support, but it can augment it. And it can bring people together in ways that we've never been able to do
Mm.
before. And as I said, because one of the chief factors for building resilience is support, technology can be harnessed to utilize to be utilized to enhance one's capacity to gain support from like-minded individuals. And
Mm.
that's something I really love. And one of the things that I really like as well is having worked in, four continents and,
Mm.
worked all over the world. I think there's a lot of opportunity for sharing of knowledge across continents and across cultures. And
Mm.
technology can be really useful. I love to run groups where I have women or men from various parts of the world with various kind of environmental influences come together and share those experiences. And the learning and the insights can be very deep. And
Mm.
technology can help facilitate that in real time. So
Mm.
there are advantages around how we can grow together using technology.
Amazing. And my last question for you, Sabina. What message would you want every woman who's listening to us uh, to understand your message when navigating life's most vulnerable moments?
Yeah, good question. That's a very good question. I'd say that when we are faced with vulnerability, with challenges, I think many of us have been taught to just push through, to
Mm.
just get on to the next, put
Yeah.
it away, and get on to
Yeah.
the next.
Mm.
And while there is utility in that, of course, for survival, I encourage, in addition to that, women and men alike, actually, to listen, right? To listen to our bodies,
Mm.
listen to our minds, to listen to these little signals that we have, the tension that we carry,
Mm.
the restlessness that we carry, the our minds racing as signals that we need to listen to in order to get the information we need to
Mm.
become more aligned.
Mm.
Because when we're aligned, when we're working from a more fulfilled place, we don't have so many of those signals.
Correct.
And so the vulnerability is an opportunity to look at what information can we get from
Mm.
ourselves, from our experience, so that we can move into a more aligned place and
Mm.
take pause, take an off season, take a recovery phase to listen to some of that so that we can become a little bit more aligned.
Mm.
Make the adversity, take opportunity of the adversity, make the
Mm.
adversity worthwhile so that you bounce back stronger.
Mm. Wow. And on that note, and your amazing advice to bounce back stronger, thank you, Sabina, for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. I think As I was listening to you speak about Radiate Mind, about mental health, about how, you support so many women and, of course, men in being able to manage burnout, in being able to manage life transitions, in being able to find greater resilience. I was learning new things from you every moment that you were speaking, and I'm sure my viewers and listeners will find a lot of value from this conversation. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.